Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We welcome all of you. Today is 8th March, is celebrated all over the world as the International Women's Day. So today I thought, while we are discussing the divine play of Srima Sharda Devi, whether we can link it to this great day, International Women's Day, why it is relevant, and how Srima Sharda Devi's divine play or life is relevant today, not only for this particular day, but in the modern world. So she is a wonderful, Srima Sharda Devi is a wonderful link between tradition and modernity. So Sister Nivedita once said, Sister Nivedita got a lot of inspiration. All of you know that she met Swami Vivekananda in London, and she was so much impressed by his sincerity and the wide range of spiritual experiences that he had, and also his insight and his study of the world civilizations, and how the empowerment of women, which was so far neglected, not only in India, which were the Indian women were facing a lot of issues, but all over the world, though the so-called women's empowerment movement had started in several countries, but they were in a very primitive stage. They were just about trying to assert their individuality, to assert their, trying to empower themselves in a way that they thought is best for them. So this feminist movement and all those things, these are the things which are part of history now, and people attribute these feminist movements, women's empowerment, to the West. Whereas in India, if you see the Vedic age, women were empowered, and she was a wife in a household, was known as Sahadharmini, one who had equal right in every aspect of life, not only religion, but also dharma does not mean just religion, but it is a way of life. So when we say Sanatana Dharma, we mean the entire life of an individual with different value systems, finally leading to the ultimate value, which according to Sanatana Dharma is moksha. So freedom, physical freedom, mental freedom, freedom from all sorts of sorrows, freedom from all kinds of bondage was the goal, not only of men but also women. So but this was during the Vedic age, and most of the Upanishads, you will find there are so many women sages. They had equal rights, not only for secular, not only in trying to earn money or maybe earn a living and cooperate in the family, do something for the sustenance of the family. She had a role to play in the secular part of life, but also in the religious part. In every ritual was, which the Vedic ritual was supposed to be incomplete if a woman did not participate in it. Normally, in a household, the Sahadharmini would be present in every ritual. The culture, the temple culture, the priests came much later. In the ancient system was built in such a way that in every household there would be a sacrificial fire. That is why the Parsis or the Zoroastrians, they have still retained that fire worship, the idea of worshipping fire, which was prevailing in those Vedic days. And the temples came much later, much after Buddhism. all the images and other things that you see being worshipped is a much later development. It is post-Buddhistic. In fact, all the Hindu temples, anywhere where formal worship is done in images, you will find most of these temples are post-Buddhistic. So you may say it was the Buddhists who introduced Buddha, who was worshipped in an image, and later on the Hindus also had their own gods. But before that, it's a historically established fact. You can't find any pre-Buddhistic temple. All are post-Buddhistic. Anyway, that's part of history. But my point was that in the Vedic ritual, we use, just as we have singular and plural in all languages, we don't have a dual case. That will be found only in Sanskrit, because for specific rituals, for all the Vedic rituals, those rituals will be incomplete if the husband was not joined with his Sahadharmini or wife. So the early morning rituals, fire rituals, which were so common, each house had a fireplace, small place where these fire rituals were performed. And life was incomplete if the wife did not, I mean, the ritual was supposed to be incomplete if the wife did not join the worship, the fire worship, or whatever yajna and all those things which were done in the morning, the sandhikala as they call it, in the evening. So all these traditions show that women were equally empowered, whether it is earning a livelihood, or sharing the duties of the household are concerned, or even sharing the duties of the small societies, small clans, the Vedic clans, which are known as Gotras. So they had their own, the wives were equally important, and there was, except for biological differences, there was hardly any gender inequality. If you study some of the famous books, history books written by Indians who have not written history based on a hearsay, or who have, when foreign people come and write our history, they don't have that insight. Indian history is not just the history of kings or the conquests by internal conquests or the external conquests. These may represent the history of the Western world, but Indian history is incomplete without the religious social transformation, the religious social culture that was prevailing during the Vedas. Wars were there were kings fighting each other, but power struggle, politics and administration and other things, in society were not so important. And if one has to write an Indian history, it has to include the social life, the religious life, and the cultural life of the society at that time, the Vedic age. So that history was written much later under the inspiration of Sister Nivedita, who was a keen student, inspired by Swami Vivekananda, of course, who taught her the fundamentals of Indian history, and how she inspired people like Jadunath Sarkar to write Indian histories written by Indians. So in those histories, you will find the importance given to women in the ancient Indian Vedic society. So it was nothing new. Women's empowerment, this International Women's Day we are celebrating now, it's just a recent phenomena, maybe 100 years old, maybe in America and all. We do not want to trace the history of the Western because it is too fresh, too new. Compared to that, we have a 5,000-year-old history where women were empowered. But the question was, why did that empowerment with the occupation of India politically by foreign powers who brought their culture along with them? Under the Mughals, to begin with, and then the European powers, especially England, the colonial rule, and even before that, the Mughal rule. They brought their own culture, and as a result, the impact was felt, and the women's empowerment, which was there in society, gradually was lost, was gradually waned. And that is why Sri Ramakrishna had to come to revive that spiritual, the ideal of motherhood of God, the spiritual empowerment of women, as Swami Vivekananda terms it. The real empowerment of women is incomplete without spiritual empowerment. So, Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi, whose divine play we are discussing, because today is International Women's Day, I would I'll try to discuss a few points where the influence of Holy Mother in the movements for emancipation and empowerment of women, not only in India but all over the world, can be observed. It requires a little in-depth study of her life to understand what can a village woman who could hardly read or write, how could she empower? How could she inspire empowerment? Of course, she empowered Sister Nivedita and many other Holy Bull and MacLeod, the Western women who did a lot of work and helped Swami Vivekananda in his mission to empower women, first through education, both secular and spiritual, and then see to it that they became partners in the progress of the nation, not only in its political and economic, socio-economic spheres, but also in the spiritual sphere. So that was his complete idea of complete empowerment of women. So how Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi became the center of her tremendous influence in the movements in India in those days for emancipation and empowerment of women. We know that according to Aristotle, once famously said that the virtue of man is in eloquence. Men are normally very eloquent. But what is the virtue, what is the greatest virtue of women? And that of women, he said, is in silence. These words are, in those days, the fact that women are, of course, eloquent. Nowadays, they are competing with men. You will find wonderfully eloquent women as you find men, which was not even imaginable 100 years ago. You could not imagine a president or prime minister or a leader of a nation who was a woman and who could inspire people by her eloquence. But now you will find that it has come, and Swami Vivekananda had predicted that. But at the same time, there is some truth in what Aristotle says when he says the virtue of man is in eloquence and that of women in silence. Especially from a spiritual point of view, silence is in fact more powerful than words. This is a fact which yoga discovered, the power of silence. What do you mean by silence? Not just physical silence. A person can be physically silent, but his mind may be totally depressed or maybe totally confused or restless. A restless mind cannot really practice silence, though physically he or she may be practicing silence. It is the silence of speech. But since speech has its origin in thought, silence of thought is the real silence. That is what yoga says. So, when women through silence have revolutionized the minds of millions of people, if we try to find who are such women, the most striking personality that comes to our mind is Holy Mother. Unlike Sri Ramakrishna, she never came out of her room. That silent power, which Swami Vivekananda referred in Raj Yoga, the power which is generated when you restrain your thoughts, not just the speech, because their speech, their thoughts and their actions were in tune with each other. Their physical silence also meant mental silence, the power of silence. Now, how can silence revolutionize the minds of millions of people? That is what Holy Mother demonstrated. So, uh, if we see from the historical perspective, 19th century India saw a renaissance, and one of the results of this modern movement was an elevation in the status of women in society. Now, this is thanks to the efforts of Sri Ramakrishna that he demonstrated before the world, before the 19th century at least, and for after that we will find the influence still continuing. He introduced to the world Sri Ma Sharda Devi, a spiritual consort, as a towering force. She was a towering force, a towering personality who was almost unseen. It's an unseen silent force. Now, when Aristotle said that the virtue of man is in eloquence, the virtue of women is in silence. Through silence, she impacted more lives than perhaps Sri Ramakrishna himself. Because that unseen silent force brought about a civilizational change, especially in the way society looked upon women during her times. During her time, what was the situation of women? Let us just try to analyze that. And by that argument, we see that Sri Ma Sharda Devi is still our contemporary for the modern women, for she resembles modernity more than many modern activists, so-called modern activists who are working very hard for women's empowerment. They are fighting, they're trying their best, no doubt, they're trying. But she is more modern in her approach. And what is more amazing is that her propensity for remaining deeply rooted, she has combined in her own personality, and it is her propensity to remain deeply rooted in the Indian ethos and spirituality. Modernization does not mean that you give up all your cultural values, the spiritual values, the cultural values, which have sustained India for thousands of years. So her approach is, while firmly being rooted in the past, as Nehru in his discovery of India writes, Swami Vivekananda was deeply rooted in the past, but he was modern in the sense he did not share the orthodoxy of the ancient people, the people of the past, but tried to modify the teachings to suit the modern age. So though Holy Mother's, her life, her mannerisms, and her spiritual nature, everything was deeply rooted in the past, in the Indian ethos. But she found a solution to the modern social malady or the problems, the maladies that the sufferings and the ill effects of the modern civilization, because she unfolded in her own life a wider canvas of love, humanity based on eternal love. Eternal means love of the spirit, the spiritual love, not the human love, which is very often selfish. I'm talking here of a love which transcends all boundaries, transcends all different cultures, nationalities, ethnicities. She had a wonderful sense of universal love. And in that sense, her approach was humanitarian, though it was centered in God, in spirituality, in culture, in Indian culture. And this is very much absent in the modern feminist theories of the Western world. The feminists who decided to take on the male counterparts in a spirit of challenge, in a spirit of fight, that we deserve equality and we will get it by fight. Whereas Srima Sharda Devi's idea of spiritual empowerment is based on universal love, which gives the power, the source of power is silence, not just eloquence. We don't need eloquence to uh, to empower yourself. That is how it differs from the modern feminist theories. The feminism, the movement of feminism, which Betty Friedan, and there are so many people both in England and in America who started great movements, the first wave, the second wave, the third wave. We will not discuss about that because we will restrict ourselves. Because those movements, they were very superficial in nature. Every feminist movement which was started either in America or in Europe had the backing of a lot of women, but they were struggling to find out the best possible method, and very often they failed because this this wonderful universal love was absent, the so-called mother's love towards the child. That is a a, uh, a small, it is a speck of that universal love because it is unselfish. When a mother loves her child, it is not based on any barter, that I love you because you will give me this or that. That kind of love is there, you can see in other relationships, human relationship. But mother's love, after of course God's love, is supposed to be the purest form of love. So that motherhood of God, or that universal love which is very natural to a mother, but normally it is restricted to one's own biological children. But the Lokamata, as Rabindranath Tagore described Sister Nivedita, that inspiration to become a Lokamata, the mother of all women, the universal motherhood, the ideal of universal motherhood was demonstrated by Srima Sharda Devi, and it found a faint reflection in the life of Sister Nivedita and other women who worked for Swami Vivekananda's pet project of women's empowerment, women's education, and through education, women's empowerment. So we will find that in the line of the great women of India, it's not the first time it was happening in India. There were so many, there were a lot of queens or Jhansi, Rani of Jhansi, who were in the field of politics, in the field of Vedas. You find Rishikas, a lot of women sages. Then we have Sita, Savitri, Damayanti, Gargi. There were so many innumerable women of India who, in their own way, brought about empowerment of women. So also Srima Sharda Devi was the latest in that line, who brought about a very silent revolution in the lives of women without creating a fanfare, or maybe very silently. So the power of silence, according to yoga, is more than the power of eloquence. Swami Vivekananda once said, out of purity and silence comes the word of power. So women's power, if we accept Aristotle's idea, comes from the power that is generated through silence. And in that society, at least when Holy Mother lived, the 19th century, anyway, women were always had to remain in the background, but that doesn't mean that they were less powerful, less influential than men. Through their silence, in fact, they could influence more than the eloquence of the men. That is what Srima Sharda Devi came to demonstrate. So the time has come now, in the modern age, to acknowledge this impact. People think Holy Mother Sharda Devi was born in a Jairam, but as we are going to discuss in our next few talks, how she lived a very simple life, she was struggling to even learn the alphabets, somehow managed to learn it with so much of yearning. She was very keen to educate herself, but how society was considering this women's education and other factors as something like a crime. She was told by Hriday that women should not read books. There's no need for them to learn. So that was the type of culture that was prevailing. I do not blame it. It was not natural to India. In the Vedic age, women had rights. They were empowered. They were educationally, socially, economically empowered. Apart from being spiritually empowered, they were empowered in other fields also. That's why you find so many great scholars. The wives of rishis, they often helped their husbands to run these gurukulas, and they were equally competent. Sita, for example, the life of Sita, in fact, when technically Rama had to, because of some vows that his father Dasharatha had taken, he was asked by Kaikeyi to, she asked Dasharatha to banish Rama for 14 years. So Rama said that I have to go to the forest. You people don't have to come. Sita wanted to go with him, and she in fact went with him. But initially, Rama said, "No, none of you should come. I will go alone. This is not binding on you." Of course, Bharat also did not know. Lakshmana then, of course, went. Bharat was absent. So when Lakshmana and Sita, even before Sita said, "No, nothing doing, I'll follow you, because I am a Sahadharmini. It is my dharma to be supporting the husband when he needs it most." But before that, very few people know that there was a proposal. They were thinking, now if Rama goes, who will rule the kingdom? For whatever reason, Rama had to go, and he was the crowned, being the eldest, he was the one who was crowned. So naturally, somebody has to take over. Of course, Bharata did it, but he was forced to do it. And even the women, the wise women of, there was a council, and they say everybody proposed the name of Sita, because they said she has all the qualities of an administrator, of ruling a kingdom. She can easily do it. Of course, she did not accept it, but this fact shows that women were empowered. Even in the Vedas, much later in the Ramayana and the other ages, they were empowered. Otherwise, how could the people, the subjects, suggest to Dasharatha? Of course, they agreed also, but she simply refused. So that shows that even in those days, women were capable of ruling a kingdom. So you can imagine what type of empowerment was there. So, but unfortunately, as I told you, history was not very kind to India. And because of the conquest, and because many, in fact, we can safely say that our women who were already empowered became enslaved. And Swamiji said that if 50% of the population of India, that is the men, enslaves the rest of it, then how can they get freedom from the colonial rule, from the foreign rule? So 700 years of the invasion by a alien culture, the Mughals, and then the European culture, in fact, that was responsible for, partially, not fully, we cannot blame everybody unless we agreed. There were our own people trying to enslave the women, in the sense, not by not giving them education, but these ideas were imports from other cultures. So they were responsible for bringing about a change, and women were relegated to a second place in society. And Swami Vivekananda in fact says that is the reason why there was a downfall, because we neglected our women, whatever be the cause. We can't blame foreign powers, though they came and they did. Who asked us to absorb those negative elements of their culture? We preserved our spirituality, but we could have preserved that women's empowerment, that wonderful system where educational system where women had access to education and they were empowered. to earn a living, to politically, socially, spiritually, in all aspects, a woman was an equal. There was no gender disparity in the ancient age. But anyway, whatever be the historical reason, definitely there was a downfall, or maybe the women became so much enslaved that Swami Vivekananda, in disgust, he said, how can you aspire for political freedom if you are enslaving the half of your population yourselves? Till the women are educated, they are empowered, and after that it goes on to the next generation, because a mother has a better or a larger impact on the education of the child than the father. If you see the lives of Shivaji, his father was working for the Mughals, but it was the mother who gave him that patriotism to fight against, to gave him the strength. If you see most of the children, the great emperors and the great people, the influence that mothers had on their lives. Somehow their mothers were empowered, though they may not have been educated. They understood the importance. And it is the mother's influence which is more on the children than the father. This was understood by our society. Unfortunately, it became a male-dominated society, and Swami Vivekananda wanted to correct it. That is why he said that in your haste to empower women, don't blindly follow the Western ideals of Western feminist movements. Though he met a lot of empowered women in the West, he praised them also. People like Nivedita and people like Henrietta Muller, who helped him a lot when he was in England. They were all the prime movers of the feminist movement in UK and in USA. So he met a lot of such feminist activists. In those days, it was going on all over the world, and of course he found something good. It's not that because whenever there is some kind of gender disparity, it would pain Swamiji so much. So he felt that unless, just as a bird cannot fly on one wing, he believed that a society cannot fly on one wing. There should be equal power distribution among women, so that the bird can fly. So Holy Mother, now let us come to her life. So her ideals, her message, her life, they emanate from a refined sense of feminine liberalism. I'm using this word because the feminist movement was some kind of activism. If see, activism rarely succeeds. When you want to undo something, if you follow the path of activism is violent reform, it very rarely succeeds. Because in the power struggle, once you get the power back, then you tend to misuse it. So it is better to call it a sort of feminine liberalism. You have to be liberal materially, psychologically, and above all spiritually. The women's liberalism, or you may say feminine liberalism, has to proceed. And Holy Mother Sri Ma Sharda Devi was a sort of unprecedented phenomena, just as our Christopher Isherwood wrote about Sri Ramakrishna, that Sri Ramakrishna was a phenomena. He was just a phenomena who transformed society far deeper than all the politicians, the economists and the scientists and all those. How? Because Holy Mother Sharda Devi was an unprecedented. Before that, we did not find a more empowered woman. At least there were hardly any contemporaries of Holy Mother who had this kind of empowerment. So she was not only a wife, the spiritual consort of Sri Ramakrishna, she played multiple roles in the same life. So she could become an ideal for everybody. In a way, she was a wife, a spiritual consort. She was also a nun. She was also a mother, an ideal mother. Though she did not have her own biological children, she was a, you can say, a Lokamata, as Rabindranath Tagore describes Nivedita. Nivedita did not marry, she didn't have children, but she was also known as Lokamata, a mother of the people. That motherly figure, she was a wife, a nun, a mother, and a teacher, all rolled into one. So that makes her an ideal for women, whatever their role may be. As a wife, as a nun, the idea of women taking up a life of renunciation as a nun was new to India. There were organizations, there were women who, like Gaurima, who took sannyas, but they were all isolated. There was no order which was founded, of course, inspired by Holy Mother, the Sharda Math and Sharda Mission. So this organizational, to organize nuns into a very big organization, independent of all men. Most of the religious orders, it is the men who control the women who belong to that order. Whereas for the first time, Swami Vivekananda, inspired by Holy Mother, said, keeping her at the center, there will be a order of nuns who would be totally independent. Men will not have any interference in their day-to-day affairs or even their ideological affairs. They will decide their own destiny. They'll run the organization. That is true women's spiritual empowerment. It's not enough to be politically free. It's not enough to be economically free. One has to be spiritually free also. So this role as a wife, it serves as a role model for the modern wives, no matter how modern they are. For nuns, she is an ideal nun. For a mother, an ideal mother. And for a teacher, mother, as they say, one mother is equivalent to 100 teachers. That is a Sanskrit proverb. We may have 100 teachers, but one mother can teach more. The child imbibes more from a mother than all the teachers. So anyway, a mother and a teacher all rolled into one. So that is how she set a goal, or she became a role model for people. So the supreme confidence, the quiet dignity, as Holy Mother, as Sister Nivedita writes, she was supremely confident in all situations. And how she discharged her different roles, that put her way ahead of her generation. In those days, you could not imagine the confidence with which she ran a household, ran an organization, for she reminds the modern world, modern woman, not the modern women, in how efficiency, quiet efficiency, which comes out of silence and which is disturbed due to emotional imbalance, which we often find in not only women but also men. That quiet efficiency, that quiet dignity and determination. So we see a certain professionalism in her approach, in her conduct and character, in our day-to-day life. And they can serve as an inspiration for modern professional women. That is why even Sister Nivedita, who was very well educated and who would share notes and interact with great literary people of the West, especially of London, like Bertrand Russell and all, she was a very, very empowered woman in the modern sense. But even Nivedita found a source of infinite power when she approached. Her quiet dignity, her character, her wonderful character, faith, firmness. So they had a profound admiration for her. Even Oli Bull, who was given a wonderful name, Dhira Mata, Swami Vivekananda appreciated, because, and in fact, he told many of the Eastern Indian women to imitate her. We say how Oli Bull, she was uh, uh, Mrs. Oli Bull, Sarah Bull, what that was her name. So she, in fact, all the Western dealings which Swami Vivekananda had to do, there were a lot of people were cheating him. So it was a woman, not a man, a senior woman, a motherly woman, whom he called Dhira Mata, means a steady mother. She had that quality. She could. She was the one who organized all events and looked after Swamiji in the West, and she played a big part. And in fact, many times, because Swamiji was unaware of all the intricacies and mm, uh, the problems that he faced in the West, he was not aware. He did not know how to handle it. Many people cheated him. He used to give talks, and they would take a big share of the collection, and many things happened. And it was Oli Bull who stood like a steadfast mother. So he used to call her Dhira Mata. So this Dhira Mata, even this Dhira Mata found a lot of inspiration when she met Mrs. Oli Bull, and when she went with Nivedita. Both of them, you can see some photos of them together. So she also found a wonderful spiritually empowered woman towards whom they had so much of respect, and they enjoyed her company when they were there, whenever they used to visit India. Even after the passing away of Swami Vivekananda, when they felt that their Guru had left them, it was Holy Mother who looked after them, looked after that women disciples, asked them to renew their inspiration so they do not give up the activity which they had started. Swamiji's passing away just in 1902, after Nivedita went to India, within a few years, Swamiji passed away. The main inspiration behind all these women, he passed away. Then everybody thought the movement would collapse. But it was the steady faith and the wonderful inspiration they got from the Holy Mother. Even while he was alive, Swami Vivekananda would not take any decision without asking the Holy Mother. So that is how she inspired a lot of people. And there's one idea which we have to remember, that one can enjoy freedom only in the company of another individual who believes in freedom. As Josephine MacLeod once said, the greatest thing about Swamiji is that he makes you free. He makes you feel free. When you are in his company, he empowers you to such an extent silently that you feel that there's a strange feeling of freedom. So one can enjoy, if a person is constantly sort of interfering in the freedom of others, enslaving others, you can't feel free with that person. So Holy Mother was an embodiment of freedom of thought, freedom of actions, such a liberal woman that these Oli Bull and Mrs. Oli Bull and Sister Nivedita and Sister Christine and many people who went to help Swamiji in his education, in his work for education and empowerment of women, they felt a strange kind of freedom which they had experienced in the West. They thought, being an enslaved country, there will be so many orthodox things, but they were surprised to find that Holy Mother was one who was breaking all the traditions which were curtailing the freedom of women. When there were so many restrictions on women, Holy Mother was the one said, no, you have to change. She had the courage to go against society. It was so orthodox. That's why she could tell her women devotees, whoever came to her, why should you be afraid? Why are you frightened? Why are you afraid of domination by men? So everywhere in the world you will find that individual rights and education, they go hand to hand. It is lack of education, which was there not only in India but also in the West. People could hardly go to the university. It is still recently, they were not allowed. They were not allowed to vote. So if we want freedom, if we want individual rights, if women have to enjoy individual rights, that has to go a right kind of education, empowering education. Not only education to empower them politically, socially, and in academically, but also spiritually. So Sri Ma Sharda Devi was very much aware of this fact. And that also in a time when education of girls was considered to be a taboo. You are educating your daughter. Even when Nivedita started the school, many of Swamiji's own friends, college friends who were themselves very educated, would not like to allow their daughters to go to Nivedita school. Nivedita was very much disturbed. She said, I've practically given up my whole life to start this and I don't get students. So she had to go from home to home and request the men who were so orthodox that education of women was considered to be a vice. So you have to imagine, Holy Mother came, and in that situation, though she herself never went to school, she was encouraging women, not only girls, but widows. Widows were not even allowed to step out of their houses. So she was the one without, of course, there were many political activists like Bal Gangadhar Tilak and all who fought for the Widow Remarriage Act, and the British, of course, supported it. So they had to fight, though the Orthodox society was fighting such efforts done by men. But it was Sri Ma Sharda Devi who was not an activist. She was not an activist. She did not go on fighting politically like Tilak and others did. But she was doing in her own silent way, convincing the mothers, asking them to send their daughters. Once when daughter of somebody's daughter, the mother was very close, a devotee of Holy Mother. She used to come and listen to Holy Mother and obey her. But for one thing, she did not like to follow what Holy Mother said. She said, my daughter, I want to marry her off. If she, in those days, it was very common, because one of the reasons why they did not educate is that once you cross 12 or 13, if the daughter doesn't get married, then she would find it very difficult. So people were afraid. It was like a taboo to allow girls to go to college, to high school even. Because of the only reason is that if she is in college for a longer time, then she perhaps may not get a bridegroom. She would not be married. So once mother got disgusted with one mother who was insisting, please tell, her daughter was very keen to join Nivedita school and study and then stand on her own feet. And this mother is to come and pester Sister Nivedita, Holy Mother, saying that if you tell her, she will agree. She is insisting that she wants. Then Holy Mother got angry on this mother. Why do you want her to remain a slave to a husband all her life? Are you not ashamed of doing this? You are yourself, you know what kind of bondage you are facing. You cannot do this, you cannot do that. And you want your girl to be also in bondage. She is half free if she doesn't marry. Let some of them take their own decisions. Why do you insist on putting somebody in bondage, you knowing fully well how much you are suffering? So she said, can't you tolerate somebody if they want to be free? Such a sense of freedom Holy Mother had. So that is why only one who understands, one who is really free. Holy Mother was totally free. If you see her personality, nobody could force her. Even Sri Ramakrishna could not force her to take certain decisions. She was his officer. She was very humble, very obedient, but at the same time, when certain things had to be done, she had her own voice. For example, Sri Ramakrishna did not like to eat food from anybody's and everybody's hand. Especially if some strange women came who were not known to be of good character, and they would come out of devotion and say, we want to serve, take the after all, they would not cook, but they will bring the uh, uh, this thing plate and offer it to Sri Ramakrishna. They were very keen to have his holy company, but everybody knew that they did not have a good character. So Sri Ramakrishna somehow avoided such women. But one day, one woman came. Holy Mother knew, but she went on pleading, begging Holy Mother that please allow me to take the plate. I am a wretched woman, I know, but still I have a desire to offer it to Sri Ramakrishna, whom she was considering to be a avatara. She had that faith. Then let me just go and offer it so that my sins can be washed away. So with that faith, she just earnestly begged of Holy Mother and said, Ma, please allow me. Mother, oh Mother, please allow me. So she immediately said, okay, you go. And Sri Ramakrishna was just waiting for Holy Mother to bring his lunch. And seeing this woman, he got terribly upset. He did not eat the food. He just kept it as it is. And when Holy Mother came there after some time, after that woman had gone away, he said, why did you send it with that woman? You know who she is, what she does outside. Never send it. I can't eat that food. That food has been touched by somebody who is so impure. And at that time, that was the only time perhaps she said, no, I can't do it. She defied Sri Ramakrishna. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna was happy seeing her freedom. She said, I'm not going to listen to you. Anybody who comes to me and calls me a mother, I don't distinguish or make a distinction between good and bad. Anybody who comes and calls me a mother, I will oblige my child. He may be a good child. For a mother, there can be a bad child, but there can never be a bad mother. Mother is always kind to all her children, good or bad. So Sri Ramakrishna then was happy. In a sense, he was a bit angry. He said, please promise me that you won't send it. I will eat it this time, but next time I will not eat if you send. He said, no, I can't promise you. If somebody else comes calling me as mother and entreating me, then I will definitely give. I can't promise you that. So you see, she had her own personality, own decision she could take. She knew what she had to do. She had the freedom, and Sri Ramakrishna respected that. He respected. That is how the mutual respect in a household was demonstrated. As a wife, okay, but here we see a direct demonstration of how mutual respect, not that she was not humble, she was very humble, she understood, she served her husband, but at the same time she had her own, she had that firmness to tell if something was wrong, she would definitely say that this is not what I can do. So that freedom, that mutual freedom, the freedom which Sri Ramakrishna gave Holy Mother and the freedom she gave Sri Ramakrishna. So that is a great lesson. So these are the wonderful things that you see, that though she was very keen, as I said, that nobody were prepared to send their young daughters, especially widows, to Sister Nivedita school. Though she herself did not go to any school, formal education, because of the orthodoxy of her neighborhood in Jairambati and later on in Dakshineshwar. She wanted to study. It's not that she didn't want to study, but she was involved. Though she herself did not go to school, she was involved in the foundation of the school which was set up by Sister Nivedita in Calcutta. That school is still there. Now they have made it into a beautiful memorial, a beautiful, wonderful school. Though it was in a very bad shape, they hired it and Holy Mother came to inaugurate that school. So she not only did she speak for the education of women or girls, which was considered to be a taboo, which was considered to be a vice, But she also wanted education for widows because she firmly believed that widows who were already subject to so many social uh, uh, injustices, there's so much of social injustice, many of them used to commit suicide. So she felt that only through education, which they can use as a tool to reaffirm or to strengthen their position in society independently. What if one is a widow? For some reason, you become a widow instead of just believing in widow remarriage, which Tilak and others thought by remarrying them. You are just changing the husband. One husband is right, you enslave, you make her a slave of another husband. That is what the Widow Remarriage Act and other social reforms, they were aiming at that. We will change the rules, we'll change the social custom that widows cannot remarry, but the fact that she will be still under somebody, under the male domination, that was not addressed. That is why these reforms did not work. And Holy Mother had the wisdom to deal with this issue from a much higher plane, a spiritual plane where gender does not make any difference. So her universalism, her motherhood, she transcended caste, creed, people like Amjad and Muslims and Christians, whoever came to her, the so-called lower caste and all, everybody was welcome. So in her dealings with others or association with others, she not only preached any universalism, but she practiced it. She transcended caste, creed, color, or community, and in her all her associations and dealings with others, even nationalities. When somebody told her that we should not buy cloth made by the British factories, so she said, why not? Just as Indians manufacture cloth here, there are poor laborers who are earning a living by manufacturing cloth. I can't tell my disciples not to buy. If they want, they can buy. They can buy Indian cloth. They can buy any cloth. So she was, even irrespective of the nationality, whether the white women came to her or any other low caste women came, she treated everybody equally. She was like a true liberator of women, or not only women but men. And she supported vocational education of women as a means of their self-dignity. She said, if a woman can earn something, whatever situation she may be in, women's vocational education, in those days, university education was almost inaccessible. There were hardly any colleges. Even in England, you will find in as late as 1880s or even much later, women were even allowed to go to Oxford and big universities. So we now think so greatly of all the women professionals who are CEOs of big companies, but we should not forget Sri Ma Sharda Devi's role in consolidating the organizational setup of Ramakrishna Mission. For practically every decision, she was the one who tended and guided the Ramakrishna movement in its early stages, at least till 20, till she lived. The direct disciples, the great Swami Vivekananda, who started this organization, also looked upon her for all the major decisions when there was confusion, when there were so many things. That is why Swamiji said, making her the center, making Sri Ma Sharda Devi as the nucleus or the center, once more Gargis and Maitreys will be born into the world. So he expected a lot. We do not know. We are too near history to understand the implication, what he actually meant by women's empowerment. It is for women to work out. See, this is one important thing. These ideas of women's empowerment, he did not want to interfere. Somebody asked him, what is your opinion about widows' remarriage or widows' empowerment? In India, he was asked, some newspaper reporter, journalist came to him. So there's a big controversy now. Some people are opposing widow remarriage. Some people are saying, no, it should be then. Then Swamiji got angry. He said, am I a woman that you are asking this question to me? Go and ask women. They are capable of solving their own problems. Why do you interfere? Why do you decide for them? Let them decide. If widow remarriage is necessary, they will fight for it and they'll get it. Let them take their decisions. Why are you restricting their freedom? So that is what Swami Vivekananda meant when having Holy Mother as the nucleus. Again, these Gargis and Maitris, who were great spiritual teachers of mankind. They were some of the best Upanishadic verses were written by, were utterances of these Gargis and Maitri, Gargi and Maitri. And there are many other women saints and women Rishikas. So Holy Mother stands as a repository of that spiritual strength that women need today. It's not enough to be educated and somehow do some patchwork and try for some equality with men. That is not going to help the cause. They may get it, but still the domination of men will continue. Unless one has the spiritual strength, unless we understand, unless the women understand the great life and significance of the life and teachings of Holy Mother, they cannot achieve the goals of feminism which they want to do in their own way. Her feminism, her idea of feminism is a spiritual feminism, where along with equality and liberation, moksha, spiritual oneness with all beings is also a very important factor. She stands as a wonderful link between the ancient tradition, the ancient women of the great India, which never considered women to be inferior. In fact, the motherhood of God, the conception of motherhood of God was developed in India. God as the mother, not just as the father. He is not just the father in heaven, but he is the mother. So, Holy Mother stands as a glorious link, as I said before, between tradition, the ancient tradition which empowered women, which was lost for some reason, mainly because of the occupation by foreign rulers who came and brought their culture and destroyed the empowerment. The empowerment of women suffered a lot because of that. It is not India never considered women to be inferior to men. So that is why Sister Nivedita, I'll conclude with this. She says about Sarada Devi. Now, what is her role in this modern women's empowerment? She says, Sister Nivedita writes, in fact, she writes, is she the last of an old order of women, I mean, or the beginning of a new one? Is she a modern woman, and how will modern women get their inspiration from her life and start a new tradition for the empowerment of women, or she is the last of an old order, which many people say it's not true. How can she be the last? There is continuous progress going on in society. So I think the second one, this should enable the readers to think deeply, especially the women who have to work out their own problems. That is why it is so important. That's why we take 2 classes on Srima Sarada Devi. One is a divine play that is on Tuesday, and on Saturdays, though we do it alternately, it is the Gospel of Holy Mother, where the immortal message of the Divine Mother who came to enable women's empowerment not only in India but the whole world. So she is definitely not the last woman of an old order, ancient powerful women. That means now no more such women will be born, but she is the beginning of a new order of women who will combine who will become a glorious link between the tradition, the traditional ancient ideal of a powerful spiritually empowered woman, and the modern ideal, the beginning of a new tradition. That's the new tradition she started, and I hope that as many of you will attend these classes, especially the Tuesday class. This is a subject which was very dear to Swami Vivekananda. He literally said Sri Ramakrishna incarnated for this purpose, to restore the dignity of women, to raise her to the status of mother, the motherhood of God, which he came to establish. That is why he preferred to call the God, the reality, as the divine mother. He could have easily said God my father, but he said no. The need of the age is to restore that motherhood of God, and he did it in a most wonderful way through his spiritual consort Sri Ma Sharda Devi, who survived him for more than 34 years and carried on his wonderful mission which he had begun by worshipping, which is unprecedented in history. He worshipped Sri Ma Sharda Devi as the Divine Mother herself, as Shodashi. That was symbolic of the new things, the new order that will come, which will be inspired by Holy Mother's life and message. So she is the ideal, you may say, somebody who will inspire the new order of women. Not the last of the old order, but a new order of women who will take inspiration and take this idea forward under the inspiration of her wonderful life and message. So I'll conclude today. Today being the International Women's Day, I thought this is a very good theme. It coincided with this Holy Mother's Divine Play class, and I wish that many women, and also men, of course, women come forward to understand, to think deeply, understand the try to understand what inspiration they can get from this glorious life of Holy Mother, which appears for all practical purposes to be very simple. A rustic woman living in a isolated village, Jairambati. That is not the Holy Mother that Swami Vivekananda spoke of. She was a intensely modern in her approach, but at the same time rooted in the ancient ideal of a spiritually empowered woman. So I'll see if there are some questions. Yeah. Now, there is a question. It seems Sharda Mai is so pure in her mind and spirit, that is why she is inspired, activated, her willingness to do good. Is that so? Yeah, definitely. Swami Vivekananda always said it is out of purity and silence that the word of power comes. Her words had power because she was silent. She had a kind of yoga. What does yoga mean? Silence of the mind. It is not just the silence of speech that is desirable, but if the mind is silent, then the words which come out of such a person will be charged with power. So unlike Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother spoke very little, but whatever she spoke carried that power of silence behind it. Yes. Is there any more question? Otherwise, I'll conclude. But one thing, I'll conclude by saying one thing. The life and message of Sri Ma Sharda Devi has to be taken up by women who are trying to empower themselves. That is what Swami Vivekananda firmly believed. He gave the hints, he gave ideas, but it had to be worked out by women themselves. That is very important. Why should men decide the fate of women? It has always been the case in history. History has been very unkind to women. It's the male who decided what women should do and what they should not do. For a change, Holy Mother's life and message came with a very, very strong and powerful message, especially to men, that if at all you want to help women, look upon her with reverence, as Sri Ramakrishna did. Give her a rightful place in society. Once you do it, let her decide her own destiny. That is the only thing we can do. So this was Swami Vivekananda's way of empowering women. As I told you, when he was asked certain questions, he said, "Why are you asking me? Ask them. They will take their own decision. They are capable of taking their own decisions." So we pray to the Divine Mother, Srima Sharda Devi, on this day of women's empowerment. Let more wisdom prevail and let women understand all over the world, wherever they are. Let them get inspiration from Holy Mother and try to empower themselves in a more sustaining way, in a sustainable way. Because the other empowerment, the activist type of empowerment, feminism, is not going to take them far. There will be clashes, there will be uh, problems when you confront and try to fight for your rights. People like to fight for their rights. There's nothing wrong in that. But that doesn't mean that there are no alternative ways. Once you develop power within, then you don't have to fight. That internal resources, that is what Srima Sharda Devi demonstrated. By her quiet, silent force she developed, especially the spiritual force. We underestimate the nature of spiritual power. Swami Vivekananda understood it. That's why in Raj Yoga he said, out of silence, in Raj Yoga and many other places he says, it is through the power of restraining of thoughts. Out of that silence comes the word of power. So I hope uh, Holy Mother blesses us on this important day, and she empowers not only women but also men in a right way, so that they can be free and they don't impinge on each other's freedom. Only a free person, a person traveling towards freedom, as Holy Mother said, only a free person will understand or give importance to the freedom of others. But if one is enslaved himself, that is why Swami Vivekananda said, India was an enslaved race. It did not understand the true meaning of freedom. The moment you become free, you inspire others to become free along with you. That is the goal. If you have mukti or moksha as the national goal, as the universal goal of mankind, then you become free and you help others to be free. In your company, whoever comes, they feel that freedom. So I'll take your leave. Om Shanti, 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 Hari Om Tat Sat, Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.